Welcome to Healthcare Sucks.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Live.
I'm going to take the next 3 questions. If I could ask colleagues to be as brief as possible so we can get answers to your questions. Czech Republic to be followed by USA. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for the information provided. In the spirit of solidarity, the government of the Czech Republic is considering to provide financial support for the WHO response to the crisis. So my question is, when can we expect the strategic response plan to be released for donors' consideration? And you already mentioned the contingency fund. So do we understand correctly that the money from the contingency fund is already used for the response, so that a potential contribution to the fund could also be attributed to the coronavirus outbreak? We would be ready to follow up bilaterally with the Secretariat on this.
Thank you very much. USA, please, to be followed by Bangladesh. Thank you very much. First of all, just to thank you for the very comprehensive and thorough briefing today. This is very, very helpful to hear this. And it would be good to hear a little bit further more information about combating the misinformation, to understand a bit more. And secondly, how you're organizing headquarters and regions to align on these regional platforms. Thank you. Thank you. Bangladesh.
Here we go, guys. This ought to be interesting.
Thank you again for the
cover-up.
briefing. I think it's extremely useful, a very comprehensive briefing. I have 2 questions. There is definitely concern for trade and travel restrictions, and even one can say that because of travel restrictions, trade restrictions, there has been...
Looks like they're going to take a couple more questions first.
Is there a correlation between... and I'm directing this question to the cases of weak health systems in countries where there is weak health system. Is there any correlation between the delay or the deficiency that we know exists in diagnostics of the cases, and we know the variables like the asymptomatic cases where symptoms can come up in between 2 and 14 days. So that is one, and then the reason that I just mentioned, that there are deficiencies. Kits are being now sent out, but is there a correlation between these measures in case of weak economies, that restrictive measures are being taken, and the weakness that they have deficiency? And the second is the daily briefing that is being planned. My question is, definitely a part of that would depend on the information flow from the local WHO office. You have started consulting with the all 150 that we heard from the briefing. But what about the local WHO office and the national authorities? How do you coordinate with them for the purpose of the daily briefing? My concern is that if this is not happening, the free flow of information, then in the daily briefing at the headquarters, we will not hear much about those regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Scott first to respond on the subject of the SRP. Thank you.
Thank you. So both the strategic response plan draft will be up on the web site for WHO tonight on the coronavirus page, as will be the appeal for WHO. In terms of the immediate release of funding from the contingency fund, we've already released funding to set up the regional platforms and the regional offices in support of country offices. We've also released contingency fund to start getting a stockpile of supplies together to provide to the highest priority high-risk countries of 5 million today, which we did today.
5 million? That's a drop in the bucket, guys.
We had a call today with the IAC.
Come on.
And all the major partners there.
It ought to be 5 billion.
This week we're going to have a meeting with the Secretary General and the senior management team, which will establish a crisis management cell at the UN level, and that will also be then reflected at the country levels through the RCs, who will be discussing with on Thursday, the regional coordinators or the humanitarian coordinators in those settings. In terms of the WHO coordination, we met with all of the country offices directors today to give them a briefing on the situation, a similar briefing to this, and we'll be meeting with them on a regular basis. They will be scaling up their own support of countries to the national crisis management systems, and it's through that channel that we hope to provide regular information and updated information into the national systems.
Mike, did you want to come in on one of the other questions? If you can keep it brief, thank you.
Countries to use your national public health emergency operations centres as well. Many of you have invested heavily in those around the world. I think we have over 200 PHEOCs around the world, and they're very much based within national ministries of health. And if we can open efficient dialogue between the operational platforms at the different levels, this will greatly speed the flow of information and the exchange of operational results.
Thank you. Maria, on the misinformation.
I'll give
This
a very
is
brief
it.
answer because Dr. Sylvie Briand gave a Palais briefing earlier today to talk a lot about this, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of myths, a lot of
myths by them.
So we are working very hard to address these as we learn about them, and we're trying to gather this information from many different sources. We have a section on the website around myth busting so that we can actually address these head on. We have an EpiWin platform, which is WHO Information Network for Epidemics, which is discussing key critical issues with many different sectors across all business sectors. And we have the Director General mentioned that we will be doing daily media briefings. So we're trying to get ahead of these rumors and trying to get ahead of this misinformation so that you have the most accurate information every day.
Thank you. We did start about 5 minutes late, so I propose to run for 5 minutes over if that's acceptable. We have 3 more questions have been indicated. If I could ask Italy, Brazil and Botswana in that order to ask a very brief question if you wouldn't mind, and I'll ask my colleagues to give a concise answer. So Italy, to you first. Microphone Italy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Italy wishes to thank the Director General of WHO, Dr. Tedros, all its officers and staff engaged in the response to the novel coronavirus outbreak. We are also grateful to China for its strong efforts at national level
Oh, kiss the China
and cooperate
boots.
with the international community in spirit of solidarity.
Okay, guys. First of all, what I want to tell you this morning is I started researching this last night. And I guarantee you, the WHO, like we heard just prior to me starting the film, you can go back and watch this later, the full version, once they're done today. And they talk about World Bank. Yes, World Bank. World Bank is not going to let their system crash. Because they are too powerful and too much money, and they are tied into one world order, period. So when they talk about funds being released and how these guys are tied in and they have money, also I want to say that's a joke. $5 million does not even touch anything anywhere. They got so much money it's coming out of their ears and their offs, as they say. Another thing is that with One World Bank, they run so much for so many different things. They have funds. Just like they said they have a slush fund. They have a huge slush fund, guys. Notice they're not even talking about how big it is. WHO has a huge slush fund. And then what they did say is that any country taking money basically from One World Bank loans will have to be repaid. That's the catch here, guys, is that all this should be coming out and being taken care of. And yeah, if you could pay some back at some point, that's great, good. But the point is to stop the plague at this point. So what they're doing is One World Bank is going to own basically the deed to your country at some point. If you take a bunch of money from One World Bank, bam, they own the deed to your country. Now that's greed. I don't care what they have to say. As far as the hoax line and whatever, I urge you to go back and figure out the number and the site and contact them. Call them out on all these things that you've seen and you know that's going on. And the videos we've ran. And the things about where this started over the border in Canada, etc. Guys, hit them up. And when you do, record it. Put it out there. So send it to me. I'll put it out there. So go out there and research. But I guarantee you I'm going to go into this later tonight. There is some major ties between One World Order, WHO, World Bank, and some other things around this that are very dirty. And with that, I urge you to go back and watch the whole thing if you could stomach it. And go out there and do your own research. Sorry for the shaking. This is early morning. Just grab things and kind of record because it came on real quick. And with that, healthcare sucks. Over and out.